I built an entry-level sim racing rig for 200 bucks in 24 hours. Here's how. Have you ever used a gaming steering wheel at your computer desk? Like simply clamping it onto the work surface and putting some pedals on the floor? Because that's the setup I've tried, and really the only sim racing setup I've tried. And I can tell you that at first, it's a little fun. But then you notice your seating posture isn't right, the pedals move around under hard braking, and when the steering wheel force feedback kicks in, your monitor shakes and your whole desk starts shaking. For me, it just lost its appeal pretty quickly. I always wanted to enjoy playing racing simulators, but never had a great experience. I always considered buying a sim racing rig off Facebook Marketplace, but I just never did. And well, the other day I just had that itch that I sometimes get where I have to build something. And that something was a simulator rig using some materials that I already had laying around. And yes, I kept it all under 200 bucks. But to be fair, I did cheat just a little bit. First, I'm using an entry-level wheel and pedal, the Thrustmaster TMX that I borrowed from my father-in-law like more than a few months ago, and I just haven't returned it yet. So that's kind of free. Second, I'm using a driver's seat out of my Volkswagen Golf SportWagen that I had just replaced with a better GTI seat that's more bolstered, so I had that laying around. So that was also free. And third, I like to build stuff, and I'm kind of a tech nerd, so I had things like mounting equipment for monitors, wood, extra screws, and hardware just laying around. The $200 that was spent on this project was all on one single item, and that's the monitor. Now, before we go any further, please go down in the comments below and comment what racing games you play, what system you play it on, and for now, I'm just keeping it simple. I play on my Xbox, so if you're an Xbox racer, also share your gamer tag down below because I need some people to teach me how to get faster. We'll get into all the detail here in a second, but let's start building and I'll take you along for a ride. Like every one of my projects, this one starts with cleaning up the space that I'm going to be working in because I find it hard to do that after each project. So here I'm just doing some very scientific testing and measuring out of where I want the seat to be as compared to the pedals and the steering wheel, and then I marked it out on the floor. I then grabbed what I believe is like a 2-inch by 1/2-inch maple to make the crossbars that will go under the seating bracket to hold the driver's seat in place. The maple is super strong and should support the weight as well as be pretty rigid for nothing to move around. Using some simple hardware of bolts and nuts, I'll be screwing those or tying those to that seating bracket at the frontmost mounting point and the rearmost. This will allow me to still be able to move the seat forward and back and make it adjustable for different drivers that want to use this rig. While I'm working on this, I'll also mention that obviously this is not a how-to. I'm not giving you step-by-step instructions on how I built this, but more just sharing a little inspiration that you could probably build your own sim rig as well if it's something you've been thinking about, if you have some hardware and the tools around to do it. The greatest thing about building your own project is you can manipulate it as you go, make adjustments, and make it work for you. So now I'm grabbing some 2x6s, which I'm going to be using for building the base. I want to say I cut these approximately 56 to 57 inches long based on my initial measurements, and using a online PDF that another self-builder shared, which I'll put in the description below. I didn't follow those instructions exactly, but they were good reference point to make sure that I was on the right track. So this is my personal favorite part of the build. What I'm building right now is the pedal mounting point, and what I did here is I used a piece of plywood as the base where I'd be mounting them to, and then I used two, I want to say like M6 bolts, and pre-drilled some holes in the side of that plywood, allowing the pedal mounting bracket to move up or down, or I should say rotate up or down, based on who the driver is, or if I have different preferences over time, so I can change the angle at which the pedals are mounted at. This, in theory, will also allow me to move them forward or backward if I drilled additional holes, which for the time being I did not, but it's not hard to do later. Now for the adjustment of this pedal mounting board, the way I'll be working that is I took a piece of the maple and made that a stringer across the two base boards, and then put in two M6 bolts with nuts on them, and that way I can either screw them in or unscrew them, and that will change the height of that pedal board, so I can go higher or lower and change their angle because they rotate on the other bolts that I connected it to the base. Now I'm figuring out the angle and how to cut the steering column boards. So these will be two boards that are placed at an angle on either side of the base, and there will be a board that goes between them to mount the steering wheel. Now the instructions I was looking at suggested I believe a 40-degree angle. I tried this out and the angle just seemed a little too I guess tight to get in and out, so I ended up going with a 45, which worked out really well, at least in my case. I would argue you could even go a little more, so that way you don't need them, you know, they're not leaning as far back, and gives you a little bit more entry and exit from the seat. But 45 worked out really well for me. I simply screwed those into the base, knowing that I'd be adding another support bracket, so they're not in there really tight right now. This is just for test fitment. So you can see I used another 2x6 to go across between those to have a sturdy mounting point for the steering wheel. I figured this simple 2x6 spanning the distance between the two steering columns would be a good base for sturdiness, but also, and I'm not necessarily planning on it, but if I ever upgrade my steering wheel system, it should be a good sturdy mount to put something else on. So here you can see I just picked up a new monitor. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. This is just me making sure it's you know, the right size. Now I am working on the monitor mounting stand. This will add additional structure for the steering columns that come up and back. That way it's not just relying on two simple screws going vertically, but also some horizontal screws that are going to hold that in place to the base, as well as the steering column and the monitors for a good sturdy monitor mounting point. All sizing and measurements up to this point are really based on myself and where it's working for me. So, you know, for this monitor, I'm going to be getting it out here shortly and installing the monitor mounting bracket, and then seeing if it's at the right height. And if it's not, I'm going to move that board up or down a little bit. So based on the fact that these are all guesses, what I'm doing now is setting up my Xbox quickly with everything roughly mocked up into place. And we're going to quickly test it out and see if I like where everything's at. So to test it out, we're doing a quick couple laps in Formula 123, and yeah, so far everything's looking and feeling good, and I like the setup. Now comes the fun part of disassembling everything that I just did. Not because I'm going to actually make any changes, because everything did work out really well, but simply because, well, it's a wood monstrosity. I want to hide it a little bit by painting everything black, so that way everything kind of blends in, and when this goes into my office, it's not a complete eyesore. To paint it, I didn't do anything special. I went as affordable as possible and picked up some Rust-Oleum satin black and took a simple paintbrush and painted everything I could. Now I'm not going to show you reassembling the entire rig all over again because we don't need to do that, but this is just an example of me putting the crossbars back on the seating bracket now that the top sides have been painted, and then we're going to move this to its final destination. Alright, let's get this thing installed in the office. So this is the rough spot it's going to go here. Now the only thing throughout this entire process I didn't plan on is audio. The monitor that I purchased doesn't have speakers built into it. And while yes, for multiplayer gaming, I'll be using a headset most of the time, I don't love wearing a headset when I'm not talking to other players. So you'll see I had a leftover soundbar that I used to use on a TV upstairs that comes with a subwoofer, and I'll be using that and simply placing that right underneath the monitor, and then the subwoofer will go right to the left of this setup. Now we're getting the seat reinstalled and ready to go, and making sure it's in the same spots as it was before. All right, I'm almost done here. Let's take a look at what this setup's gonna look like from a first-person point of view. So that's a quick rundown of the build, and I can tell you right now that so far it's been a ton of fun, and I'm really happy that I did it. And I've spent more than a few hours in the seat, and it's addicting to try and get faster and faster. So far, I'm happy with all my guesstimates throughout the project of like monitor placement and wheel placement. There are already a few small tweaks that I might consider making, like moving the monitor up just a few centimeters. As far as games, my favorite games I've found so far are, I've been playing a lot of Forza Motorsport, F1 23, and Dirt 2.0. Dirt is so addicting and challenging, but it's so much fun. One thing I will share that if you are not a sim racer or haven't got into it is your settings for your wheel and pedal setup need to be adjusted for every game you play. And without making these adjustments, the fun can quickly be sucked out of the game. So look up your steering wheel and pedal setup and match that up with the game you're playing. There's someone who has a tutorial on the best settings if you don't want to go in there and manually figure out every one. This will make the driving experience so much better. I've got the kids behind the wheel, and they both seem to think it's pretty great too. They love feeling like they're driving a vehicle, especially when you're in that first person mode. They're not very good drivers yet though. Finally, if you're racing in any of the games I'm currently playing or want to make a recommendation, let me know down in the comments below. I need some racing friends, and again, I need to get faster, so any tips and tricks would be much appreciated. Thanks for watching this video, and I will see you again pretty soon.